This van actually goes over the bluff, tumbles, and it's demolished. And me and him's like, oh shit. And I was like, how did it take off by itself? And he said, I don't know, man, because it was stopped when we got out, but then when we walked away from it, it just took off rolling. And it was crazy. So then I'm in panic mode now because now I got to go back and tell that man that his van took off and went over a bluff and it's demolished. And it's like 40 feet down into it, like a real small creek. And so I'm panicking. But anyways, we got to drive back over there. So at this time, we got a yellow Cadillac. It's a two-door coupe. And so we all get in the car. And I go over there. And they're just finishing up this last room that they're painting. And they're both on ladders. I think they're doing a trim or whatever. Him and his old lady. So I walk in the room and I'm like, hey, man. I said, don't hit me, but I got something to tell you. And he was like, what are you talking about? And I said, your van just went over a bluff and it's totaled out. And then him and his old lady looked at each other and started laughing. And once they started laughing, I knew it was okay. And then he said, oh, I forgot to tell you that sometimes it jumps out of park and it takes off rolling, so you got to scotch the wheels up with some brick, some brick or something like that, or log or something like that. So then I was at ease because it was his bad. He forgot to tell me, that he said you got to slam it up in park, but sometimes it jumps out of gear and it takes off rolling. So anyways, he said, well, what I need you and your brother to do is I'm going to look for a small truck because they still had to drive back to Kentucky because that's where they lived at. He said, I'm going to look for a small king cab truck or something, and I just need you and your brother to take me to go buy it wherever I find it at. And then we was like, yeah, we could do that, But anyways, we take them. It wasn't that far away. I think maybe an hour out, something like that, where he found the truck and he bought it. And then he came back, then they loaded up, and at this time we end up having to rent another truck to get the stuff moved into the house. But we ended up doing that and getting moved in. They loaded up the truck and they left. They had a few kids with them, a few small kids. And maybe 3. But anyways, they ended up heading back. And then we stayed there. And it's a nice country place. We ended up getting a job in town right there. And it had I think it just had one factory that I knew of. But anyways, we worked there for a little while. And then I ended up hooking up with this girl that lived on the other side of my dad's house. And me and her got serious, so I moved in with her. And then we're dating and stuff like that. Well, anyways, we date for a good while, and me and her break up. And then I go back to my dad's house. Then when I'm staying with my dad, him and his old lady breaks up. And my dad goes back to his hometown where he's from. He's still in Tennessee. And then me and her kind of try to work out what we're doing. So she's, I'm up there, then I'm at my dad's and stuff like that, back and forth. Well, anyways, when my dad breaks up with her, they break up. They were married, but they had split up for some reason. And he asked me, could I take him to the bus station? And I was like, yeah. And he had this antique car, and it was green. and it actually changed the gears by push button, you know. And he asked me, did I want to buy it? And I was like, yeah. And he said, give me $200 and you can have it. So I give him the money. He gives me the title. Then I take them. Me and my brother takes them to my street brother. We take them to the bus station. Then when I get back, I take the car up to my girlfriend's house, which is next door. But then his old lady comes home from work because I take them to the bus station when she's at work. And she calls up there and she's like, hey, what's your dad's car doing up at your house? And I said, I bought it from him. And and she said, you can't buy it from him because I'm the one that bought it. Something like that. But really I had the title, and if I wanted to be mean, I could have just kept it because I did have the title. But I ain't that type of dude. So she says, no, I'm the one that bought that car. And then I was like, well, I can give it back to you, but you're going to have to give me my $200 back, you know? So she said, all right, bring it back down. So I took it back down to her, and she gave me my $200 back. But I really wanted this car because it was an antique car, and it was a solid car, and it wasn't, you know, it needed painting, but there wasn't no dents or nothing on it. It was all original. But anyways, I gave it back to her, and she ends up trading it for a truck. But as time passed, me and the girl parted ways. So I went back to my stepmother's house. And then I was like, she's like, what are you going to do? I said, I don't know. I'm thinking about going back to Detroit. And then she's like, you know what? I'm going to go back too. And she said, we can just go together and we'll find a place to rent or whatever. And I was like, cool, because I really didn't have too many options at that point, you know. And I could have went back to my godmother's house, but I didn't, you know. And so anyways, but I think at this time they had done moved back to Detroit, and that could be the reason I didn't go back to my godmother's house. No, that wasn't the case. They were still there. I just didn't go back there. I wanted to go back to Detroit because there's something else that happens in this story. And so they're still there, but me and my stepmom decide we're going to go to Detroit, and she's only going to take her necessarily belongings in this truck, and then we're just going to drive to Detroit. So we do that and find an apartment, stuff like that. When we find this apartment, the girl that I was seeing next door to her, she ends up coming to Detroit also. And I was like, but what had happened is her mother lived out in Westland, and she had went, and because she didn't know exactly where we was at the beginning, so she went to her mom's first, and then she called my stepmother, and then my stepmother, she was asking could she find a place for rent, and actually upstairs from my stepmother's was a place for rent. So she told her about that. So she comes, rents the place, me and her get back together, we're staying up there. And then as time passes, we separate. And when we separate, she starts dating this boy. He lives upstairs too with his mom across the hall. And so she starts seeing him. But anyways, I move on, stuff like that. But then later I decide that I hear that my godmother and them are living back in Detroit, but I don't know exactly where they're living. And I believe I hear this from my mother because they stayed in touch by telephone, talking, here and there. But then I said, okay, they live in Detroit. I got to find out where they live because I was want to look them up. So the last known thing my brother was doing was working at a place called Mako. So I said, if he come to Detroit, maybe he just looking for Mako in Detroit because they was all around a body shop. So anyways, I called the nearest body shop and I asked for him, and they said, yeah, just a minute, let me get him on the phone. So actually I guessed right on what he was going to do, and then I got a hold of him, and he was like, won't you come over to the house for dinner and stuff? So he gives me his address and stuff like that. And so I go over there and we're eating dinner, and after we get eating dinner, we talking about old times, and we're talking about old times, and we're sitting around, and he said, remember that time down south when you borrowed that dude's van and it went off the cliff and stuff like that? And no, I was talking about it to him. I was telling him about it, and he remembers it. He was laughing real hard and stuff like that. And I was like, man, it wasn't that funny. He said, no, there's another part of the story. And I was like, what? And he said, okay, you ended up accidentally demolishing his van because it, jumped out of gear and stuff like that. And I was like, yeah. And he was like, guess what happened after you left? And I was like, what? He said, we was all around the kitchen table playing spades. And then my little brother started smelling smoke. And this was during the winter time. And they had to, remember I told you this house had a wood burning stove in it. And they had a wood burning stove cranked, trying to keep the house warm and stuff. And they was in the kitchen, and the wood burning stove was in the living room. And he said his little brother started smelling smoke, so him and his little brother went in the living room to see what was the deal. And they looked at the ceiling, and the whole edge of the ceiling was on fire. So what had happened is, I think the fireplace, the chimney was, because this was an old country house anyways, I think the chimney maybe had some holes in it or something, and it actually caught the house on fire. So he was like, don't you know, we tried to grab what we could grab to get it out the house, but it wasn't much, just like some clothes and stuff like that. And this house was going up because it was old, an old wooden house. So they all got outside, but they called the fire department and all that. He said, time the fire department came, because he said, you remember that dude said he had a lot of paint thinner and all that other stuff up in the attic? And I was like, yeah. He said, once it got lit real good, it was like the 4th of July. And the house was just blowing up all over the place. And he said, actually, that house burned down to the ground. And they just stood out front and just watched. They had to watch all their shit burn up with the house, And I said, oh, man, that is crazy. And then, so that's what he was laughing real hard about. And then after he got done laughing and telling me his part, he was like, man, I bet that guy wish he would have never even met us. And I was like, I bet he does too, because he lost a van, lost a house. And even though it was all accidental, hopefully dude had insurance on the house, but I don't know. But anyways, then they said they ended up having to go, they had to get help from the Red Cross. Then they said this ended up, I think Red Cross helped them get a trailer. And then my younger brother was telling me that, he said, man, we had to eat pork and beans and macaroni and cheese for a long time up until, because I guess the first little bit of money they got, they had to, buy sheets and towels and all, they had to buy stuff to actually live with. And then they didn't have a lot of money, so she got checks every month, but I guess it was like, the first money they got, I guess they had to buy a lot of stuff, so they didn't have much grocery money. So he was saying that they ate pork and beans for the longest time. He said to this day, he don't even eat pork and beans anymore. And I thought that was crazy. But he was telling me that story. And it was a trip, that happened, but it was just crazy, that was some crazy incidents that happened with us. And I said, I can't believe the house burned down. He was like, yeah, man, we went in the living room and the edges of the roof, the ceiling was on fire. And all we knew to do is, call the fire department and grab what clothes we could get. And they wasn't able to grab too much, they lost everything they had, So it was crazy. But that was a weird incident. And then, like I said, we hooked back up in Detroit. And that's how I hooked up with him, because I found out where he worked at, stuff like that. And then they asked me, did I want to come back and stay with them? Because at this time, I'm staying off of Michigan Avenue and staying in a house over there. And I wasn't doing anything but, working at Myers and stuff like that. So I went to visit them, and we always had good times together. So they asked me, did I want to move in? They had an extra bedroom. And I was like, yeah. And he said, hey, I might be able to get you a job working with me at the body shop. And I was like, cool. And he said, why don't you go to work with me? And I'll talk to my boss, because I know they need help. And he'd probably put you right to work. So me and him went over there. And this Mako actually was like across the Dearborn line. And but we actually worked at that Mako, and they actually put me to work. And what we did at Mako was we would sand cars down, mask them up, and get them ready for the paint shop. Even though we knew how to paint, they just had a painter there, so that's what me and him did. And they did individual cars, then they did a whole lot of Detroit taxi cabs and stuff like that. And so that kept us pretty busy, working over there at Mako. But it's just that was just some of the incidents that happened, And then there was times where his oldest sister, she had married this dude in Kentucky. And then she used to call home a lot. And like I said, I stayed with him a lot of times at different places. And she used to call home a lot. And she used to have trouble with her husband. They was breaking up, or I don't know if it was her choice to leave, or he was trying to kick her out, or whatever the deal was. But every time, she'd call and want us to come and get her, we would have to shoot to Kentucky and pick her up. So we did this a number of times. And but we was always there for her. She needed us, we was going to be there, And so anyway, we used to drive back and forth to Kentucky quite a few times. And what it was, she'd come stay with us for a while, then they'd end up getting back together, and things like that. And the last time we went and picked her up, it was just me and my godmother. And we took my brother's, he had a silver EXP, and we took it, and I drove. And my other brother, I think he had to stay home and work, the reason he didn't go or something. But nobody went, just me and her. And plus, the EXP small. It's just a two-seater car. I think it's got a little back seat in it. But anyway, it's still a small car. And it's a stick shift. So we driving it. We go over there. When we get over there, this thing quits on us. And we're trying to get it running because now, at this point, she's leaving, but he's not aware of it. So she's actually called us, and we're in Kentucky, but we're like at the foot of what they call the foot of the hollow. Holler or whatever they call it. But anyways, and they live up in there, and that boy's family's got property up there and stuff like that. But anyways, at the foot of it is a house where my godmother knows this man and lady at the foot. And we're spending time there waiting for her because she's actually, at this time, she's sneaking away, trying to leave, for whatever reason. So this car quits working, and we're trying to get it going, and something happened that it was just, I think the motor went bad or something, and it was something major. So we ended up having to leave this car, and then my godmother ended up renting a U-Haul, and then we ended up renting a U-Haul van. Because at this time, this girl just came with just a big duffel bag full of clothes, her, and then we took her back. And when we came back, my brother was mad because that was his car, But it was his mom's car, she called it. And, she just didn't have time but they were planning on going back to get the car, And that's what happened later on. They ended up getting a trailer, and they went back. Me and him went back, and we got the car back and took it to Detroit to get it fixed. But anyways, this was the last trip that we took going to pick her up because at this point, her siblings and her mom was tired of going back and forth to Kentucky picking her up because every time they'd do it, she'd come to Detroit and she'd end up getting back with dude, and he would either come pick her up or she'd take a bus home or whatever. So it was just kind of, after so many trips, they just gave up on that. But anyways, one morning we woke up and I went on the porch to smoke a cigarette. I noticed this strange car up the block. And then she comes out the house and walks up the block to that car. So then I went in and I told my godmother, I was like, hey, she's going back home. She's like, what are you talking about? And I said, they just pulled off, and you know who it was? It was actually her. I don't know if they were married or just dating and living together. I'm not for sure at that point. But he had came and got her, and she took off, So my godmother said, this is the last trip we're taking to get her, because we done did it maybe, I think, 5 or 6 times. It was quite a bit. But, that was that situation, And then we ended up getting an EXP fix at a Shell gas station because at first we tried to fix it. We couldn't fix it. So then at the corner of Woodmere and Dix Highway, there was a Shell gas station. And I don't know if it's a Shell gas station, but it was a gas station that had a garage. It might have been a Mobil or a Shell. I'm not for sure. But anyway, we ended up getting that EXP fixed. But, that's some of the stories that, that happen. And I'll have more to come later. So make sure you hit that notification bell. Let's get them likes up. And be looking out for the next video. I appreciate you listening. And it's just plenty of stories to come. So if you're interested, stay with me, support the channel, and we're out.